Have you ever reached a point where making a decision just feels, well, heavier than it used to?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, a big decision, like a career change or a big investment, it's not just nerves, it's something more. It feels like the consequences are bigger.
And the margin for error feels like it's just vanished.
Exactly. It's shrunk to almost nothing. And that weight, that paralysis we can feel, it's real.
Yeah.
And the sources we looked at today, they all agree. This isn't you just being timid or, anxious. It's a reality we need to understand, not something we have to just push through.
Right. It's not a bug. It's a feature of a certain life stage.
So our mission in this deep dive is to give you a really powerful way to think about this. We're going to introduce a distinction that, honestly, most people just completely miss. The fundamental difference between risk and irreversibility.
And that separation is it's essential. Because most people, they lump those two concepts together.
We do.
But understanding that they are separate things, that's the crucial next step. It changes how you see every choice you make going forward. You stop seeing this huge wall of danger.
And you start seeing navigable obstacles instead.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I think for most people, the immediate reaction is, well, risk is bad. Full stop.
Right. Risk equals danger.
Yeah, think about the words that pop into your head.
Yeah.
Danger, loss, regret, mistakes.
Failure.
Failure. So it leads to this very logical seeming conclusion. Maybe I should just avoid risk altogether.
It seems like the safest path, doesn't it?
It does.
But it's the most common trap. And it's so misleading. The central argument across all these sources is that trying to avoid all risk, it doesn't get you to safety. It almost always gets you stuck.
Stagnation.
Stagnation. You just stop making meaningful choices. And that failing to choose comes with its own massive, often hidden risks.
That's the pivot, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need to just strip the emotion out of the word risk.
Yeah.
So here it is, the simple, non-emotional definition. Risk is just when something might not work out the way you expect.
That's right.
It is. It's the gap between what you think will happen and what actually happens.
It's purely variance. I mean, think about it. If you try to learn a new skill, there's a risk you won't get it.
Sure.
If you launch a new product, there's a risk people won't buy it. Risk is, it's just part of everything we do because we never have perfect information.
So trying, learning, changing, all of it has risk.
All of it. And critically, doing nothing has risk too.
And that hidden risk, the risk of stagnation you mentioned, that's often the most damaging one in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. When you choose to do nothing to avoid some, perceived risk, you're actually risking your skills becoming obsolete.
Right, if your whole industry changes.
Exactly. Or you risk your health deteriorating if you avoid the risk of a new exercise program. And financially, I mean, you risk missing out on compounding over decades. That is arguably the biggest risk of all.
So doing nothing isn't safety.
Not at all. It's just choosing a different, much slower acting risk.
Okay, so if risk is just variance and maybe some opportunity cost, then what is that heavy, crippling feeling we started with? Where does that come from?
And that brings us to the key distinction.
Irreversibility.
That's the word. Irreversibility is what turns a simple failure into, well, a catastrophe, or at least something that's really painful to come back from.
So it's the difference between an experiment and a bet you just can't afford to lose.
Exactly. The definition is so simple. If this goes wrong, I can't easily undo it. It's not about whether you fail. It's about the cost of getting your life back to where it was before you started.
And the costs, they go beyond just, losing the bet. We're talking about things you can't get back. What are those categories?
Well, they tend to fall into a few buckets. First, there's money you can't easily replace.
Okay.
Then there's time you absolutely can't recover.
Gone forever.
Gone forever. And then there's energy you just don't have to spare. But maybe the most important one.
What?
It's the loss of confidence that's really hard to rebuild.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is. Because when a failure drains your resources and takes years to recover from, your belief in your own judgment takes a huge hit. And that scar tissue makes the next decision even harder.
So here's where it gets really interesting then. That feeling, that discomfort, isn't your brain screaming risk.
Yeah.
It's your brain screaming irreversibility.
Yes, that's it. It's calculating the recovery cost.
But I want to dig into that idea of cost because I think for a lot of people, a big financial loss that feels irreversible, right? How do we separate those two when a lot of money is on the line?
That's a great question, and it's where this framework really shows its value. A big financial loss is definitely risky,
Right.
but its irreversibility depends entirely on your personal situation. So for one person, losing, say, $100,000 might be a huge risk, but it's reversible because they have other assets. They can get back to their baseline lifestyle in maybe 6 months.
Okay, so they can absorb it.
They can absorb it. But for someone else, losing just $10,000 could be truly irreversible
How so?
because it means their entire emergency fund is gone. It means they might have to sell their home. It could take them years and years to save that money again.
So irreversibility isn't about the dollar amount itself.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's measured by the time and capital it takes for you to return to your personal baseline. That recovery cost, that's the true weight you're feeling.
So when a decision feels paralyzing, it's our mind calculating that high, maybe unacceptable recovery cost. The discomfort is basically saying, hey, if this fails, the cost to get back to zero is too high.
Precisely. And this also explains why that feeling gets stronger as we get older. It isn't about becoming more fearful. It's about wisdom. It's about understanding your resources are no longer infinite.
Right, because earlier in life, the cost of failure was just cheaper.
So much cheaper. Your time felt cheap because you had decades of earning potential ahead. You had so much energy you could just work longer to fix a mistake.
You could just bounce back.
You could bounce back, and your confidence came right back with it. You had this built-in resilience.
But the math totally shifts later on. I mean, after 55, let's say, those resources are viewed differently. Time is not an infinite commodity anymore. Energy is precious.
It's a premium, so mistakes echo longer. Recovery takes more effort, and that confidence you spent decades building.
You guard it. It's precious.
You guard it fiercely. So that hesitation you feel, considering a huge move like selling the family home or starting a totally new career, that's not fear.
That's wisdom.
That's wisdom doing its job. It's checking for the exit. It's calculating the true recovery cost and asking, if this goes wrong, what's my actual plan for getting back on my feet?
I find that so empowering. You know, you shift from criticizing yourself, oh, I'm too afraid to act, to respecting your own instincts.
Exactly. My instincts are wisely calculating resource depletion.
Okay, let's make this really practical. Let's walk through some of the examples from the source material.
Let's do it. 3 scenarios focusing on how you can lower the irreversibility even if the risk stays high.
Okay, scenario 1.
Learning a new, difficult skill. Let's say you want to learn data science. The risk is high. You might hate it. You might not be good at it.
Okay.
But if you sign up for, say, an online course that's subscription-based, costs a little a month, and takes an hour a night, the irreversibility is incredibly low.
Because you can just stop.
You can start after 3 weeks. You've lost very little money, very little time in the grand scheme of things, and you walk away knowing something you didn't before. The risk was high, but the recovery cost is basically zero.
It's a classic low-cost experiment. You're testing the water without having to drain the whole lake.
Right.
Okay, what about a scenario where you intentionally buy flexibility?
That brings us to scenario 2. Launching a new business. Say you want to open a small coffee shop. The market risk is huge, right? Most new cafes fail.
For sure.
Now, the irreversible path would be to sign a 10-year lease, buy all the equipment up front, and quit your job on day 1.
Oof. Yeah. High stakes.
Very high. But a reversible path, maybe you start with a pop-up location. You pay more for a month-to-month rental.
Or you lease the equipment instead of buying it.
Exactly. You spend a little extra for that flexibility. That extra cost is your insurance policy against irreversibility. You're trading a small, recoverable amount of money for the ability to walk away. If it fails, you're out in 60 days, not 6 years.
This really highlights that the danger isn't trying something. The danger is locking yourself in before you really understand what you're doing.
That's the trap.
Which brings us to the irreversible traps.
Scenario 3, the irreversible trap. This usually happens when you're being rushed or there's some kind of external pressure.
Like a friend pressuring you to invest in their can't-miss project, but you have to decide by tomorrow.
That's a classic one. Or a sales pitch pushing you to sign a multi-year, no-exit contract right now. These things almost always involve complex legal papers, sinking a huge amount of capital up front, or making a decision with very limited information.
Like deciding to retire to a new country you've never actually visited for more than a week.
Perfect example. The risk is high, sure, but the irreversibility is catastrophic because getting out means legal battles, liquidating assets at a loss, and maybe wiping out your entire retirement savings.
This distinction, once you see it, it just It immediately lowers the anxiety. You stop asking that paralyzing question,
Is this risky?
and you start asking a much more empowering one.
Is this reversible?
And that one question changes everything. Because if the answer is yes, then the risk suddenly feels manageable.
Because you realize you're not betting the farm, you're just running an experiment. It might be a costly experiment, but you've kept your control. You've kept your options open.
So to summarize the lesson here, the goal isn't a risk-free life.
No, that's not possible and probably not desirable. Risk is where growth happens. The real goal is to make decisions that preserve your ability to adjust.
Risk is part of living.
Irreversibility is what requires caution. It's what requires planning.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? It means that knowing this difference, it's maybe one of the most powerful tools you can have. Especially now, in a world that always seems to be pushing for bigger, faster commitments.
It moves you from reacting emotionally to perceived danger.
To acting strategically based on your actual resources. So here's the final thought to take with you. As you look at the next big decision on your horizon, a new investment, a lifestyle change, whatever it is, don't just make a list of the risks. Instead, challenge yourself to actively design your plan to reduce the irreversibility. Ask yourself, where can I build in a pause button? Where can I find a 3-month escape clause? What's the smallest possible pilot program I could run?
That's the key.
Because you might just find that maximizing your flexibility, even if it costs a little bit more upfront, is the wisest investment you can make. It's what keeps you moving forward safely instead of being stuck trying to avoid life altogether.